Hello, welcome back to Beauty Bee and to my 1 month Project 100 Uses update. I have been at this for actually just shy of a month at this point. I believe that I started counting on the 21st or 22nd of August. It is now the 19th of September as I am filming this, and I think I've made some really good progress. So we're going to talk about the numbers first. I'm not going to go through every count because that just seems a little bit silly and not very interesting. However, I will put a screen at the end of each section that gives the counts for each product so that I can do pretty easy bookkeeping going forward, and in case anyone really wants to see that. Don't know why you would, but it'll be there. So in my project, I want to keep track of how often I'm using my color cosmetics. So eyeshadow, lip products, and cheek products, as well as a couple of items that I sort of have always viewed as extras in my collection. A couple of different eyeliners, a glitter primer, and a face primer to determine if those are products that are worthwhile for me to purchase going forward. The goal of this is to see how I use my makeup, to just gather data on that for my own personal knowledge and growth. However, I also want to keep track of things to make sure that nothing is just getting neglected. And I think that this project has really helped with that second part of this goal, which I hope you will see come through in my counts. I think that's an intro. Let's get into it. I have 14 different containers that have eyeshadow in them. There are 13 palettes ranging from, I believe, 4 to 16 shades. I additionally have one ColourPop Super Shock single in Ladybird. And I think the single most used item is my Wet n Wild Rose in the Air palette, which looks like this. And I have used this 21 times over the past month. Now that's not terribly surprising to me. I've been using this shade quite often to fill in my brows. I've actually used it today. Additionally, some mixture of these two shades is sort of a go-to for me on the inner corner if I don't have something else picked out. So it's not surprising to me now that I hit 21 uses over what, probably a 28 or 29 day period. However, I think if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have told you that I thought this was going to be a little bit more of a challenge to use. It's not something that I had been reaching for very much, but I'm glad I am. And I actually only hit pan on this on the very first day that I used it on my brows. So it's been less than a month and I've made very significant progress. Of course, I'd used it quite a bit before that. It was very close to hitting pan before I started using it in my brows. Just I've used it as transition quite a bit. I pulled 3 different eye palettes in my Shop My Stash. I believe that the Avant Pop palette, which is a 10-pan palette from NYX, I actually pulled before this project began, and I think that the period in which I was really focusing on it may have ended before I started this project. However, I still ended up getting 12 uses on it, which makes me think that maybe that did overlap a little bit. On the Ultimate Utopia, I used it 16 times, which I think is fantastic. And the e.l.f. Very Bad quad, I ended up using 8 times. That's not fantastic, especially since my Shop My Stash period is ending today. However, it's just, I'm realizing not a palette that I really reach for as much when I have access to my entire stash. when I was at my parents' house, I had quite a limited amount of makeup, and I found that that was a really nice supplement. However, now that I'm back and I have access to everything, it's just not something I find myself reaching for very often. And when I do, it is usually just to dip into one of the mattes to buff something out. If there's one set of items that's really getting neglected here, it is my set of e.l.f. quads. I have 3 of these. I have one that is green based, hot jalapeno, pumpkin pie, which has both a warm and not quite cool, but a much more neutral brown, and berry bad, which I discussed earlier. I only used the hot jalapeno and pumpkin pie 3 times each. Going forward, I want to make more of a point of using those because I really do enjoy the shades. And I'm actually wearing a hot jalapeno. It has this yellow color that's all over my lid today. I think it's very pretty. Now moving on to lip products, I actually have 19 lip products at the moment, which is, I think, a little bit excessive. I would like to slowly whittle that down to more like the 15 to 16 mark. I feel like that would be a bit of a more comfortable place for me. And of course, because unlike eyeshadow, where I may very well be wearing 4 or 5 palettes, I think I'm wearing 4 at least today. I'm much less likely to have, 5 lipsticks on my lips at any time. At most, I'm looking at 2. So the counts for everything are quite a bit lower. The lip products that I use most often, at 14 times each, were the Wet n Wild Mega Slick Slip Gloss. That shouldn't be as much of a tongue twister as it is. In the shade Great Correlation, which is this peachy gloss, and the ColourPop Just a Tint in the shade Chimichanga, which is a bright red. And I'm hoping to finish off this in particular, but potentially this by the next time I update this. Let me show you how much I have left. It's really not a whole lot on the ColourPop. That is rolled all the way up. So I should be able to use that up within a month. And I don't know how well you are going to be able to see it, but I have quite a bit of that sort of stripy texture that you see on the outside of lip gloss tubes when you are making good progress on them, all the way down to about here. So I think that I've used a good chunk of this, but it's been so long since I finished a lip gloss that wasn't clear that I really don't feel confident in knowing how much I have left. So I would like to finish both of these off. Some other ones that I've gotten some pretty significant use on were the Maybelline Pink for Me lipstick. I used that 7 times. The Almond Rose lipstick from Maybelline, which I used 5 times. And NYX Tiramisu, which is a nude lip gloss. I used that 7 times. I think Maybelline Ruler and to a lesser extent e.l.f. Berry Sorbet were really getting neglected this past month. Maybelline Ruler is a matte liquid lipstick that is a fairly deep red with a little bit of pink in it. I think it is a shade that I will reach for more naturally as we get into fall and winter. It is still very much summer outside here. To a lesser extent, I think I've also been ignoring my e.l.f. Berry Sorbet. That is a matte crayon from e.l.f. I'm not super impressed with the formula. I feel like it's weirdly dry for how much it moves around and transfers throughout the day. And I have very similar colors in other better formulas, which I think is probably the larger factor in how little I actually end up using that lipstick. I used both of those lipsticks only once over the course of the past month. Now let's talk really quickly about my cheek products. I used both Tarte Harmony and the Essence Pure Nude Highlight 13 times over the month. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Tarte Harmony isn't even higher. I did make a point for a 2-week period of getting much better use out of my Wet n Wild blush in the shade, let me look at that, Rosé Champagne. So I ended up using that 8 times, and I actually am wearing that today as well. I've got it mixed with another blush from Wet n Wild, which is Hummingbird Hype, but I think it's very pretty. It's very glowy, and I'm glad I shopped my stash for it. I have definitely used it more in the past few weeks than I had for months and months before that. I really want to make a point in the next couple of months to really use my 2 cream blushes, which are the e.l.f. Monochromatic Multi-Stick in Sparkling Rose and the Milk Lip and Cheek Tint Mini in Work. These are cream products, so they will go bad sooner rather than later, and you just need so little of each of them that I don't feel I'm making steady progress with how often I've been using them, and I haven't been slacking terribly on using these. I have used Sparkling Rose 7 times and Work 6 times. So I'm using one or the other about half of the time, and I'm still not seeing great progress. And I would not be upset if these went bad before I finished them. However, I would feel a little disappointed if they went bad before I had gotten what I felt was adequate use out of them. So I want to focus on getting some progress in those in this coming month. And then the final set of items we have to talk about in this section of the video are some of the more miscellaneous extra products. These are my 2 liners, the Kat Von D Tattoo Liner and a Wet n Wild Twist Up Liner. And I used the Kat Von D one 4 times and the Wet n Wild one 5 times. I have a mini of the number 7 primer that I am trying to use up and really judge if I want to repurchase in the future. And I've come to the conclusion that I definitely do not want to repurchase it, but I do want to use it up. And working towards that goal, I used it 12 times over the course of the month. I think I'm actually getting quite close to having that finished. I suspect and hope that next month that will have left my collection permanently. I also decided to keep track of how many times I use my glitter glue, again as a when I finish this sometime far in the future. Is it something that I would repurchase, something that I feel I use an adequate number of times to justify the space and the money that it takes in my collection? And I think so far my answer is yes, but it's an eye primer. It's going to take ages, months and months, maybe more like years to finish. So I'm not committing myself either direction yet. There's definitely more time to think about this before I would ever need to replace it. So in this chunk of the video, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my panning goals and what I would like to sort of do with my makeup going forward. As we already talked about, in the shorter term, I would like to finish off for sure this lipstick, but also maybe this lip gloss. I would at least like to make some good progress in this. My Tarte Harmony blush took an unfortunate fall, and it was almost like the entire powder just came out, though luckily I dropped it when it had the lid on, so it just fell into the lid. I was able to push it back, except for some of this chunk that is missing off the side. I had basically finished the this inner circle already when it took the fall. Much of this was lost on impact, and I think that I have a very long time left with this blush. I had a mini of Party, the one that they gave in the Sephora birthday gift. What was it, like 3 or 4 years ago at this point? And it took me a good 2.5, 3 years to finish when I was using it not every day, but most days. So I have a long time left on this, but it's something I would like to finish. And it's going to be even longer if I'm focusing on using those Milk and e.l.f. multi-sticks. Now, eyeshadow is where things actually get somewhat interesting. I have realized that I am very disappointed in this Wet n Wild packaging. We're keeping the hair tie on this because the last 2 or 3 times that I've opened this compact, I've gotten brown powder everywhere. And I'm actually going to be decluttering this particular item. I don't love the shades enough to deal with the mess that I get every time I use it. So unfortunately, this is going to have to go in the bin. I have owned this for probably 2.5 years at this point, and I did clearly get quite a bit of use out of it. I mean, I think you can see that I have significant pan in both the white and the pink. However, I have similar-ish shades in my collection. I don't think this is particularly special, and I don't want to deal with this packaging anymore. Now, I spent a lot longer on that than I thought I would, but the point was I hate the Wet n Wild packaging that's getting decluttered, and long term, I would like to empty out the other 2 that I have. I pulled this one just to show. This is the Petalette. It's their purple quad. And I think my plan for this is I want to mix these 2 shades and eventually pan probably this shade in this Maybelline City Mini palette and repress the mixture of these 2 lighter shimmery shades into this pan. Can you see that light iridescent pink? I think that'll be a really pretty shade, and I think I would like to add it to this palette. I think that it would play really nicely with this pink and the brown, and that it would make a nice little travel palette that I could take with me when I go to conferences and have just a nice little business appropriate option for any time. And there's my update. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you like this format where I'm combining the counts with my panning goals. I'd love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you will like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I hope I'll see you next time.